Hi, so today we are discussing on the topic called rheology. What is rheology? Rheology is the science which deals with the flow. That is, anything which is flowing is termed as rheo, and its understanding or knowledge we call it as rheology. So, in this topic of rheology, we are basically dealing with the flow of liquids or semi-solids. Basically, there is another flow property which is exclusively for the powders, but here in term of rheology we deal with something called as the flow of the liquid. There is another term which we are most accustomed with. We call it as viscosity. Now, what is this viscosity? Viscosity is the term which is used for understanding the resistance to flow. Now, when I say a liquid to be less viscous, that means the that is having a less resistance to its flow, or it can flow easily. On the other hand, if you consider the example of which is not having a good flow, okay, we call it as more viscous. So more viscous liquids will be having a very less flow. So when it's having a very less flow, we say them as a viscous liquids. So viscosity is something, the term which we suggest as a resistance to flow. Okay. Now, if you say the example of which is the which liquid will be saying as a less viscous and which is as a high viscous. So if you have, suppose, honey. So honey, if you see honey, it will be having a very high consistency, and when you try to pour it off, it flows very slowly. So that is what we call it as a resistance to flow, or this honey is a viscous liquid. On the other hand, if you take water, so in the case of water, you will be finding that it is flowing easily. So as it flows easily, we call it as less viscous. So there the viscosity is almost unit. Now when we go for the rheology, rheology is broadly classified into two types based on its flow nature. So what we are having? We are having something called as Newtonian flow and non-Newtonian flow. What are those? We are having Newtonian flow and we are having a non-Newtonian flow. So basically, when we say that Newtonian and non-Newtonian, there are two terms which comes when we discuss this resistance to flow or the flow, that is shear stress and rate of shear. When we say the shear stress is directly proportional to the rate of shear, when it is directly proportional to the rate of shear, we call it as a Newtonian liquid. In the case where we cannot bring about a direct proportional relation between shear stress and rate of shear, we call them as a non-Newtonian liquid. Please remember this thing. So what is the basic thing I told about? I told about what is rheology, what is viscosity, and what is the general classification of the flow property of the liquid. That is, the liquids are classified based upon Newtonian and non-Newtonian flow. So So please remember this thing. Thank you.